Start off today. Obviously, when you put together an event like this, it gives you a great deal of time to reflect on what the event is about, what the event's trying to address. And I'm sure you have this with your own events as you're putting together your annual meetings or whatever it might be. That opportunity to really reflect and figure out what are the issues now, what are the things we should be really concerned about now. And so, as a result of putting together this event, I've been thinking an awful lot about lifelong learning, the market for lifelong learning, and the business of lifelong learning, which is what we're really here to talk about and to learn from each other about over the course of the next couple of days. And obviously, we're at a point where there is just tremendous opportunity out there right now. The need and the demand for lifelong learning has never been larger. So there's a lot that can be done out in the market. There's obviously a lot more competition now too. The dynamics of the marketplace are a lot different than they were even just a few years ago. And I think as leaders in the market, as we're looking at the pressures of competition, as we're looking at all of the opportunities that are out there, many of which technology is creating for us, we're at a point now where we really have to, I think, start striking a balance among the sometimes conflicting ideas and opportunities that are there for us. And as I was thinking about that, I came up with several balancing points where I think we all need to take care at this point as leaders to make sure that we are striking the right balance going forward with our initiatives and how we think about our business. And I think these really resonate a lot with some of the things that we heard and experienced during the first session. The first balancing point that I see out there is between product and process. And what I mean here is there's a lot of focus, and we hear this a lot in working with organizations around how do we develop the right product? How do we put the right features into the product, whether that's an event, whether that's an online learning experience. And I think the seductive idea that if we can just get the product right, if we can just get the content right, then everything's going to be good. We're going to be able to get the learners that we want. We're going to be able to get the customers we want. But we have to balance that, of course, against the idea that learning is not an event. Learning is not a product. Learning is not just content. Learning is process. Learning is context. And learning takes time. Learning is messy. A lot of learning is highly informal, the types of things that we were talking about in the first session. So strategically, and from a business standpoint, balancing how we approach our markets and perhaps putting a little more weight on the idea of process as opposed to just product and content. And that's the first balancing point that I see. The second one is between the personal and the communal. And if there's one buzzword that we tend to hear whenever we're working with clients these days, it's personalization. And you can probably think of instances where you may have used personalization in the context of your own business. Maybe you've talked about trying to be, for instance, the Amazon.com of your market. And that's, again, very seductive and I think very admirable. We want to be able to personalize learning experiences for our learners, make sure they do fit the specific needs of the learner. But there's also the danger there of narrowing so much that it becomes an insular experience for the learner. The learner isn't seeing outside of the things that are particular to that learner. So keeping in balance, keeping in mind the community, the communal aspects of learning, which is obviously what we're engaged in right now. And how do we strategically make sure the community, the sharing of ideas, the introduction of new ideas, the creating of connections is at least as much, if not more, a part of what we do with our learning experiences, with our business of learning, as the drive towards personalization. A third balancing point I see is between application and reflection. And this is the idea that content and experiences need to be highly relevant. Relevant is obviously a key word in the world of adult learning, and for good reason, but relevant and immediately applicable. People need to be able to take their takeaways back to the office and get to work on them right away. Need to be able to apply them right away. And again, that's an admirable impulse and something we should all be working towards, but we have to balance that against the fact that reflection is often the space in which the most and the best and the deepest learning occurs. We have to balance it with a need to provide white space, the silence, the time for people to absorb and then be able to integrate it over time. Again, this is back to the idea of process into what they're doing. So as leaders, making sure we're factoring that into the types of experiences that we're providing out to our marketplace. A fourth balancing point that I see is between convenience and effort. And there's been a lot of buzz, a lot of drive towards making things more convenient for the learner over past years. And again, this is an admirable impulse. We're all busy people. We want things to be as convenient as possible. We want our learning served up to us so we can access it immediately and get on with it. We want to be able to buy our year of CPE for $500 or our lifetime CLE for $750 and just be able to get it and get done with it. And that's admirable, but again, we have to balance that against the fact that we know, those of you who have read some or all of Make It Stick know this point, that we know real learning is almost always effortful. You've got to put your head into it. You've got to put your heart into it. You've got to put some effort into it. You usually have to take some risk. You usually have to get a little bit uncomfortable. And that stands in opposition most times to the idea of convenience. So we have to be careful to strike that balance. Next balancing point is between competency and imagination. And up there with personalization, competency is another one of those buzzwords that we hear all the time now. Organizations want to create competencies. They want to design their learning around competencies. They want to design the path to competency that their learners can follow to get all of the answers and to have all of the skills and knowledge that they need to be successful in their career. And again, this is an admirable impulse. We want to be able to help people recognize the skills and the knowledge that they need to succeed in a particular field or industry. But as I think about the concept of competency, I have a poetic background myself. I'm not a poet like Celisa, but I've studied a lot of poetry. And T.S. Eliot came to mind, who wrote that we often dream of systems so perfect that there's no need to be good. And I think of competencies as systems so perfect that we don't need to think outside of them at all. But of course, that's not the way to move a field or a profession or an industry forward. You have to be able to think outside the boxes. You have to be able to apply imagination. So yes, competency by all means, we should be focusing on that, but we have to balance it with the need for imagination. And then the last balancing point that I'll highlight, sort of the one that rules them all here, is the balancing point between machines and humans. And I don't know how much folks in the audience have been following what's happening with things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and deep learning and all of those kind of buzzwords out in the tech sector. But machines, for the most part, can do everything in this left column better than we can in terms of providing, delivering learning experiences that focus on product, that focus on personalization, that focus on application, on convenience, and on competency. Machines are going to be better at that. So as we're thinking about how we balance going forward and where the opportunities in the market for lifelong learning are going to be going forward, I think we have to be competent over on this left side. We have to learn how to leverage the technology to make us more competent there. But that's going to be the price of entry in many ways. It's going to be the right column, the human column, that's really going to represent the opportunity in the market for lifelong learning and the business for lifelong learning. So our hope is that we've designed this event to strike a balance between the columns, that we are covering both in one way or another. But I think you'll see, you probably already have seen, we've got a little bit more of an emphasis on the right column as we think about the concept of leadership and what it really means to be leading learning as we move forward. And I'm going to step aside, and Celisa is going to talk a little bit about what we have put together here for the Leading Learning Symposium.